Well, if appealing to middle class wins campaigns, then I did something wrong in 2005. Look, I wasn't here for the first panel that described the problem, but I think you could say, without fear of contradiction, that we are the financial capital of the world, although there's been some conversation about whether we're losing that edge. We are the entertainment and creative capital of the world. And up until relatively recently, you would have said that we were the middle class capital of the world. When you think of the iconic middle class family, you would think intuitively about New York. But it's not an overstatement to say that it is not a place that you go anymore if you're in the middle class, you're trying to make it into the middle class. And why that's a problem is because although Mike Bloomberg has characterized New York as a luxury product, you cannot sustain any economy, and I think this is true nationally as well, if you don't have an affordable place in the niche of the economy to provide the services for those people. You know, you can say it's great, you know, even if you own a yacht, you need someone to swab the deck and cook the meals. Even if you own a beautiful home, you still need someone to maintain it. You still need someone to patrol the streets and collect the garbage. And I have to tell you, one of the things that's most troubling to me is it's good to see that this group of elites that you circulated for this survey have internalized the idea that losing the middle class is a problem. But it's hard to point to anything, or it's very hard to point to things that the city is doing to actually address these things. You know, if you need evidence of that, just look when Mayor Bloomberg, who I think has done generally a pretty good job, when he points to the proof points for how the city is doing well, the first thing he utters is that property values are up. Listen, that is undeniably a good thing. You want property values up, you don't want them going down. But to not understand on a fundamental level how that rise in property values is something that is making many New Yorkers deeply insecure about their fate, even if they live in one of those homes, like in my district, where their home has gone from $300,000 to $600,000. So I think that we need to do things. I still believe that we need to make the tax code more progressive. I still think that we need to do things like I've proposed in the past to help not only big businesses, like you asked about in your survey, but small businesses pull together to provide health insurance. I still think we need to realize that we have been obsessed and focused so much on the big businesses of Midtown that we've forgotten that about 60% of the job creation is going on the small businesses of the outer boroughs, like Maria Thompson represents, and yet we do very little to address their concerns except give them more tickets, more regulatory barrage comes down on them every year. We do very little to help them organize, to help promote them on the internet, to help do the things that we should be doing since they're such a job-creating engine.
I think the fact that politicians are having this conversation, and it's the daily staple. The fact that our very own U.S. Senator has imaginary friends called the Baileys that are this middle class.
It wasn't a surprise that our senators had imaginary friends.
Yes, that's true. Politicians tend to have imaginary friends. So I think that the problem is real. The fact that 300,000 of the highest income earners in our country earn the equivalent or more of 150 million Americans at the bottom, I think is astounding and worrisome. So the problem is not unique to New York. It's unique to, it's common across the spectrum, across every urban center. New York's problem is one, I believe, of having abandoned a large sector of the population that is crafty and hardworking and tends to figure things out on their own and doesn't necessarily rely on government or see it as a crutch. However, that could be the beginning of the end if we don't pay attention to that sector. I think that's the sector of strength for us. The real New York and the life of New York really plays out in the hundreds and hundreds of neighborhoods across the city where people are paying mortgages, where they're shopping for good schools, where they're concerned about the basic issues like transportation because they care about traffic circulation in their neighborhoods and the local businesses in their neighborhoods and the regulatory maze that they have to live with every day and the licensing procedures that take too long and they lose money on. That's what regular New Yorkers and that leading middle class, the hemorrhaging middle class, is worried about. And that's why they make that critical decision of taking their shopping capacity as a sector of the marketplace and going elsewhere, which is a tremendous concern for us. So, you know, do we need to support tourism? Absolutely. We get 44 million people coming to the city, entertainment, hotels, theaters, all the tourist attractions. The financial sector is critical. Of course, Manhattan is critical for us, and we need to ensure that it works. That's the heartbeat of the region. But we have to pay attention to our most important asset, which is working families that ultimately are generating those little bambinos that will become good, strong, participating citizens in this free market and in this free democracy.
At the end of the day, I think that the middle class in New York City understands that the taxes are going to be high regardless. It's always been that way in a city like New York, where we have such great diversity, where we have such great transition and turnover every single year, every single decade. But nonetheless, people in general do want to stay in New York. They want the reasons to stay in New York. And over and above the tax rebates or the renters rebates or the tax reductions, I think the most important thing that the middle class of New York City or the aspiring middle class of New York City would like to see is predictability. Predictability, knowing what they can expect by living in the city, knowing what they can expect from the government. And that means knowing that where they live will be stable and that there will not be illegal conversions next door, because that is an issue. That the neighborhood character will stay the same as what they bought into, because that's exactly what they expected from the zoning code. That their schools will be effective and will achieve the results of educating their kids or their neighbors' kids if they don't have their own kids, and making sure that those kids even have a way to safely get to and from school. Making sure that the city or the government is not in many ways selectively and arbitrarily enforcing laws that may not even be effective. For example, when someone has to go to work for the entire day and they come back once a week or once a month finding a $100 sanitation fine because the person who was at the bus stop threw away a cup and that cup was blown by the wind and landed in front of that person's house while that person was away at work. That is something that is an unpredictable act of government that enrages the middle-class person living in this city. It's about predictability of what it is to live in this city and what government should and should not be.